Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Mel Carmine Show. I'm Elisa V, your co-host here, and we've got a great show for you today with our special guest, Tom Althouse, the original writer of The Matrix. Tom was one of our esteemed speakers at the Quantum Summit 2 in Cape Canaveral earlier this month, which was a wild success. And if you were unable to attend or watch the live stream, that's okay, because you can still watch it in all its fullness on the live stream playback, which is just $29.17. So just go to Quantum Summit 1776 and click on live stream playback and watch the full monumental event. I also encourage you to watch the behind the scenes of the Quantum Summit 2 short video documentary, if you will, made by yours truly. All links are in the description box. And if you want to support us, consider supporting our sponsors, which are all listed below, including LegalShield. Stop paying for legal services by the hour. A small monthly or annual fee gets you access to a lawyer that can advise you on a huge variety of issues, but without a huge bill, and protect your security with identity and credit monitoring. So for more information, look in the description box. And lastly, if you enjoyed this podcast today, I really encourage you to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment. We love to get comments from you guys.
But before we get started, folks, make sure you hit the pause button. Okay, go down below. There's a Rumble link. Go over to Rumble and follow us over there. QFS1776.com.
Without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Tom Althouse. Tom has been a guest on the Mel Carmine Show in the past and a Quantum Summit esteemed speaker, and I'm thrilled to welcome you back, Tom.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I took a sip right then, but it's great to be here.
Bad timing.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now, Tom, you know, as the MC of the event, I saw firsthand how you had the audience pretty riveted at the summit, and your story is fascinating and awful and just unreal. And you can see, just so everybody knows, you can see that full presentation that Tom did at the summit. You can see that on the replay, which is recorded both days. Tom actually did 2 parts, and he did one on day 1 and one on day 2. But a little bit about you. I'm just going to give a little bio and give you give the audience a little bit more about you in case they're not familiar. So Tom is an award-winning performer and writer from a family line steeped in theater tradition as well as music. He dedicated his life to a faith-based approach of living what is possible through the arts. Through layered thinking, he's introduced new and innovative ways to how we create stories, films, and theater. And he has toured internationally and has performed with a number of improv companies throughout the country. Currently, a documentary is in the works regarding his life's work and screenplay, The Immortals. Along with his story development, he has introduced new technologies that have opened brand new frontiers with endless possibilities. So, Tom, you've done so much, and I thought what would be really interesting, because I know your story as it relates to The Matrix, which you authored, is pretty riveting. But I thought maybe what we could do is we could start with just letting the audience know, kind of like go back a little bit, right? And talk about your background and how you started as a screenwriter, and a very short overview of your personal life so that everybody can be a little more familiar with you.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to cap it right away with, if you look up someone's name and their case is thrown so blatantly in the courts, then you can imagine how much power and money went into throwing that case when you have evidence such as this. Here's the original thing, the PAU number's on there. So right out of the gate, I want to establish that this is real. And this is the actually the certified one from 1998. So the evidence is important to show that this is the 128 pages. Basically, a page equals a minute in film time when you're a writer. And this is what was used for The Matrix in 1999. This is the 1998 version. So none of the other claimants, including Warner Brothers themselves, has a screenplay. There is no screenplay of the Matrix. Their attorneys are saying there's no working drafts at all. We have that on tape from their own attorneys. And that's a story in itself. So we're legit here. Now let's go back to how it all happened. What happened was my childhood was not a rosy one. It was very different. You have to come from a very dark place to write the Matrix material. I think we could all agree to that.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so dark that I was saying they should use the art direction from Blade Runner, which is also a brilliant but dark show. I actually pitched that at the pitch session. But the reason this catalyzed into a story is because I, who went through all this experience like others do in a rough home, was basically asking God, is there any way we can prove ourselves as your children, if you will, whatever faith you believe in? My perspective was at the time as a young Christian boy, can we prove ourselves to you, Father, rather than having to go through this revelations prescribed that everything's going to be set in stone, there's no way out of it, we're all going to suffer and tribulation. Can we prove ourselves instead? Give us a test. Let us prove ourselves. That's really the nutshell of what the Matrix story is. Now, lately they've been saying Tom Althouse has no idea what the Matrix means. Well, nobody has any idea what the Matrix in stolen form means. But I know exactly what the Matrix means in the original work, where they're even claiming the Immortals title, which Warner Bros. Claims the Immortals title, not Matrix title. I know what it means. And it comes from that desire to want to have us all connect. I felt like humanity, even at a young age, is scared. They're scared of death. Everybody has that simmering thing underneath where they're like, death, they try to avoid others that are sick, like leprosy almost. It's like they don't want to deal with that issue. Yet there's a driving force in each person where they seem like they want to keep living. They want to keep living, and they don't want to think about a terminal end, which Shakespeare said, to be or not to be, what that is centered around in Hamlet. So being educated and having these experiences, they culminated in the idea of the only way we can really thrive or advance as a civilization is to come together. So the code in the Matrix story, right from the beginning, when it was being contrived or downloaded, was a call to bring together great minds, people who had different cross disciplines, to bring together to solve problems. That's really the code. But it comes from a life steeped in horror. I was going to the religious right, Pat Robertson's organization. I was recruited, actually, by the president of his school, that televangelist that was very corrupt.
Of course, yeah, I'm very familiar with him, and he had his show. Was he
700 Club?
700 Club, thank you.
Yeah. So that, I was recruited into that organization, and I justified it by saying, okay, well, it's a Christian environment, maybe it'll be a good place to study. Yeah, we justify our way into some of our bad places with red flags all over the place. Well, I went in and I started
How old were you, Tom, at the time when you got recruited into that? Like, how old were you?
29.
Okay.
28. And so I had a 3-pronged, I really thought it out heavy. My family line is like one of those bloodlines that is steeped with exactly what the other side wants. Swiss royalty, the Battle of Hastings, my one relative, Frampton, was knighted by William the Conqueror. It's like nobility. It's like all sides, even the line of David. So we have all these lines that the cabal was very interested in. And I was considered unique in my family as gifted in all areas of art. So it was like, wow, the right bloodlines. If you're still looking at that, German Nazi idea that they had of eugenics, I fit the bill. In fact, they wanted me to be the poster boy of Pat Robertson's organization when I got in there.
So question. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit here. So in a sense, is it fair to say that you were on their radar from a very young age, if you will? I don't know the right terminology, but it would seem like you were already in their sights for whatever. You were in kind of like the crossroads of this bloodline, right?
Yes.
And the giftedness that you had, and so before you even got to the point of writing this amazing work of art, you were already in their sights, so to speak.
Absolutely. Lebensborn never died.
Okay.
And basically absorbed Nazi Germany. So it was all this idea of arranging things to get the best product of children that they considered would fit their bill of that, master race, if you will. It never died. That idea still kept going. There's a heavy prejudice against African Americans, Mexicans, even Italians still. It's like this idea that there's still a eugenics thing in order here. where I was wanting to put forward that if you go back to the originations of the art, it's wanting to put forward we all have value. That's why you had that scene with Zion underground where all the different faiths come, all the different ethnic groups come together. They all have value. Barbara Walters actually said that was her favorite aspect of the Matrix ripoff film, was that it had all coming together in harmony. That's what I wanted to see. I didn't like it being said. Anyway, but that's exactly, what was going on. But as I was brought into Robertson's organization, I was told that, you're one of the elite now. You keep hearing that phrase in the cabal when they offer you the chair. It's like, you're one of the elite now. You're one of the elite now. It's very much what they choose their label to be. It's important to pay attention to that word. What does that mean to be the elite? Well, it means that you're separate and above others. That's eugenics again. And it's interesting that,
and better, right? Better.
Well, yeah, and more desirable or things like that. And they really push it. But what's dangerous is with religious right, as a facet of the cabal, is they push the idea that God has sanctioned that God has chosen you before you're born. And they teach us that at Robertson's organization. They separate the men from the women. And they say the women are supposed to serve the men. I mean, it's a theocracy nightmare that they're planning for this reset, where you have a one world religion in a society where aging has been solved. And now Stanford IBM is saying they've done that. That's why the Immortals title, right? That Warner Bros. Actually copyrighted the Immortals title. And you've got this whole situation where they're saying, the men lead, and that God has chosen before you're born who's going to be in his grace and who's not. And that the others are basically fodder. They teach you at CBN that you are separated from all the rest, and that they're the only religion. That goes for any even Protestant faith. You're the only religion that totally is with God and listens to God. Talk about Nazi Germany, and that mentality.
And not to digress too much, because I want to keep this moving, but you're saying things, and I feel like each thing has like a little nugget, to uncover. So when you say you were recruited, right? How does that work? Like people like me who don't grow up in that kind of environment or, that kind of bloodline, right? We just grow up, and there's not a lot of formality, if you will. So how did you get recruited, or, how does that work?
Well, even at the young age, there was like SRA, I'll put her down, SRA programs that you're segregated out of your class. I was pulled out of my classmates, even in second and third grade, and set into a special gifted thing where a teacher named Mrs. Kunkel would come in and give us donuts, special treatment. We're given individual education. And they said I advanced like 2-3 grades right away. Basically, it was like that. So they know who they're looking at through our education system. And teachers actually have a way to note who their gifted ones are. Okay. But it's a combination of your look, genetics, and your gifts and your talents and aptitudes. It's a combination of all of those. They actually had a guy come in, measure each of us, like our heights, evaluate our physical statures, taking notes. It was the most eerie thing possible. That's right, from Nazi Germany. So each of us had to be geared and analyzed at a young age, where we all lined up in our gym shorts, and they would measure our body fat, things like this, who's going to be most successful or be most athletic. Insane. But that's what they do at certain schools. And you're supposed to be leaders in your communities. The elite wants to lead and never let go of their power. They want to make sure they have the control of the influence. It's really a battle about influence. So if you're gifted and have a certain look, like I was taken because of the dimples, the blue eyes, the blonde hair at the time, I looked like, if you look at what I had in that paper I was handing out for people who have a memento, I looked like, like 12 years old at 30. And it's like, but the big blue eyes, the dimples and everything else, and the smile, and they're like, okay, this is it. You're going to be the face of the Christian coalition. So, it's like, but then they give you all these requirements. But the reason I wrote what I wrote is because I learned what the plans were. I wanted to whisper through art. So really the catalyst for the creation of the Matrix story was learning what the plans were. And I had to whisper through art what they were. Now they're claiming the Matrix is a documentary. Well, they don't go into why or how or what makes them think that. But yes, I was whispering through art. Didn't think it would mean anything until future generations. So I thought, I was losing everything from me because I didn't play ball with the parameters that were required in order to have this success. And so I said no to what they were asking me to do because they were telling me how it would mislead, especially women, would be misled to think that Pat Robertson was good because they look at me and go, well, even if Tom did something evil or something, he seems like such a nice boy that we're going to go ahead and excuse it. And now they're doing that with Elon Musk.
Okay, so just to kind of, so to be clear, I guess a lot of what ended up happening in your story and what happened, you know, with the whole stealing and that everything that went on, right, which you spoke so eloquently and emotionally at the summit about this back history, you know, because some people sometimes would look at that and say, like, just kind of poof, you know, it happened, but you had this whole history that was connected and intertwined with these people, let's say. And so the question I have, which may or may not have anything to do with what you're talking about, but it just kind of came to me. So this is a Christian coalition, but does Christianity really come into it? You know, I'm saying, like, from what you're describing, it's anti-Christian or anti-tenets of, you know, everything Jesus stood for and Christ consciousness stands for.
Exactly, Elise. What you have is you have a situation where if you look at Robertson's history, Pat Robertson gets into televangelism because why? What's his motivation, right? Like we say in performance. And what it is actually Toronto Star wrote an article which exposes it quite clearly. He was in Manhattan with his wife, Dee Dee, which he never showed because he didn't think she was pretty enough. So he always had fading pageants, queens, and things like this on his program to give him a better image for women. And the PR machine and a diversion here, PR machine at CBN said that women are supposed to look to Pat Robertson and want to be with him because he has these other women around him that look pretty and are associated with him and were paid to do so. A lot of them had mental breakdowns, but that was part of the process. But in the Toronto Star, it talks about Pat Robertson in Manhattan with his wife Dee Dee in the early start of everything before he was in televangelism, if you can call it that. And he wanted to be a jet setter, and that meant he wanted to be able to world traveler, famous at all the big parties, part of the elite. It's part of their thing, you know, like you're in crowd. And what happened was he wasn't cutting it. Nobody was liking him and Dee Dee much. No surprise there. And what happens is a pastor shows up with a really nice car, takes him to a really nice restaurant, and Robertson's basically quoted as saying, "You mean you can have all that, all this by doing that?" That's when he suddenly wanted to be a televangelist. It wasn't about God at all. Right. In fact, God was in the way of it. He wanted to have the riches, the fame, and everything else. Same thing Wachowskis were promised by Dina Laurentiis when they sat down as D players to be given the work. So Robertson then ends up at a place in Virginia Beach where he figured that would be a real good place where there's all kinds of controversy. Go in there and you can rise quickly in those kind of issues around you. So he then also said in his newsletter, which is Pat Robertson's perspective later, he said the dumbest demographic really was the evangelical community. So if he's saying his support base is the dumbest one, right, then it shows you also he doesn't have a heart for them. He's using them for donations and things like this. He's playing that game. And when I met him too, when he was grooming me to be the face of the Christian Coalition, I learned about the sex ring that was going on there and that he was the head of that sex ring. And that's how this is all started. And that gets into later why Neo is called Thomas A. Anderson. That gets into why that name's there. It's all connected to Pat Robertson's sex ring. So all this they're doing is making everything tie together. And that's what I'm excited to bring forward with you as we go through this all.
Okay, so very interesting. And as you said, and I won't ask you to go into it at all, but you said as it relates to the way you were raised, there was a lot of horror and difficult stuff that you endured. So how old were you when, and explain the process of how the formulation, let's say, of the Matrix story came about, like I'm a writer, I haven't actually finished, I have like a screenplay, I haven't finished it, but I know that there are moments where I get like an inspiration or something hits me, or even when I'm just writing in general, like you kind of channel it, like you kind of don't know where the ideas come from, but they're just kind of getting on the screen or they're getting on, with a pen. So explain what happened. Like, how did this story, the formulation of it, occur, and how old were you, and where were you at the time when this happened?
Well, here on page 31, this is part of the interrogation scene. So you're getting right to the heart of the matter. The first scene I wrote was the interrogation scene.
Okay. And then you went
Why is that?
to the beginning, to the end, like around it.
That's right. And I teach writers, best thing to do is get something that ignites you. Get a scene that you can anchor in with and let the story evolve out of it. It can be in the middle of the story. So get the scene that touches your heart most. And that's where all this pertinent information comes in about their plans. And the interrogation scene is also the first scene they shot for The Matrix, and the scene they also put all my personal information in. They know how important this scene was. Okay. So this scene echoes everything that's going on. And the process that happened to me is in here. So basically, it's like Shakespeare in Love. In this scene, you're hearing everything that happened to me at an information meeting where the president of CBN called me into a meeting after I was exposed to the sex ring. And they were trying to shut me down not to tell anybody about what happened to me on this trip with this associate dean, what he did and what he divulged. And so that meeting is a core in my life memory of what everything changed. Everything was taken away after that with these letters and such from Pat Robertson, and the people who attended the meeting. Some were waiting in another room, promising me I keep my education and my jobs. I know this sounds out of context, but actually that's what was occurring. Everything was being taken away. So the first scene I wrote,
it was being taken away because they wanted you to comply with whatever their agenda was and what they were doing, and you didn't want to, which is, you don't do that, right? With the cabal and the kind of people, right? There are consequences.
That's the logical, in a normal world, that's the logical assumption. But let me take it back to a darker world.
Yeah.
They knew I hadn't done anything wrong. They knew I was the victim. Oh, I hate that word, but I was exposed to the sex ring in a very maniacal way, and that information was divulged. So they look at it this way. They don't want to take a chance that you are going to speak. So if you're a victim of their crimes, their sex rings, they're going to destroy you. That's it. You're done. They're going to destroy you. There is no negotiation on working with them to make a deal, cut a deal. You're dead. If you're a victim, you're a loose end. We got to deal with you. And that's basically how they operate. And so I was called into a meeting, promised I could keep everything if I spoke, but that wasn't the intention at all. They had people waiting in the next room to make sure everything was taken.
And when you say keep everything, can you be more specific about what you mean?
Jobs, education, my son's lives, everything was destroyed. My reputation, just, no due process. Making sure that they what they call anonymouses. They started with former security guards for Pat Robertson that would go and approach anybody I knew, any love interest that came to me, a job I was at, anybody I was working with, Commonwealth Musical Stage, news site. All these different people were contacted and told, do not use Tom. And what they were saying was he'll figure out in time when he loses enough jobs and loses enough friends, enough family, that what it means. That was what they said. And they had actually wanted posters up throughout their halls in the network building saying detain on site. I lost everything, thrown out, everything was gone. And they told me, you know what this means. You know what this means. Didn't matter if you're going to cooperate or not. You're out because you were exposed to the sex ring. You got to be trashed. It's like a rape victim being disposed of.
Okay. Now, hi, Elisa V here. Did you know that medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, accounting for 66.5% of bankruptcies? In fact, in 2022, 17% of adults with healthcare debt either declared bankruptcy or lost their homes due to it. We can all agree that the healthcare system is broken. Well, there is an alternative that I want to tell you about. It is impact health sharing, which Yahoo News is calling the disruptor in the $4.6 trillion healthcare system. With impact health sharing, you can choose the doctors, clinics, and naturopaths that you want with less restrictive guidelines. Medical bills are reduced to their fair market value, and premiums are 30 to 72% cheaper than competitors. Plus, Impact Health incentivizes healthy habits like supplements, gym visits, and therapy. Call 888-275-1056 and use the code MELCARMINE for a free quote today.